In early 1948, the Reverend W.G. Burchard, a retired minister, saw a need for a church in what was then largely rural West Boise. The small group that Reverend Burchard gathered met in a small, unused church building that had belonged to Bethany Presbyterian Church. The building had been empty since World War II, just waiting for a new young church to occupy it. God's faithful provision of the building was clear. The location was ideal, just south of the intersection of Cole and Fairview, across the street from Cole School, the cultural landmark of the area. On July 16, 1948, Cole Community Church filed Articles of Incorporation. The objective of the corporation, as recorded on the application, was to establish a church of the Christian faith in the Cole School community in Ada County, state of Idaho, for the purpose of Christian worship, religious training in the Christian faith, and in general for religious, benevolent, and charitable purposes, and not for profit in the material sense. Since those early days, many things have changed. Boise is no longer a modest town of about 34,000, and the small farms that dotted the landscape around the Cole-Fairview intersection are long gone. Cole School, the original anchor for that early West Boise community, was demolished in 2009 after serving for over a century. And we, of course, no longer meet in a building on Cole Road. However, several important things have not changed. God's faithfulness to His people, and our focus on worshiping the Lord, serving our community, and training up followers of Christ. Today, in 2018, the objective of Cole Community Church is, by God's Spirit, love, and grace, making disciples of Jesus Christ. By equipping believers to become disciples of Jesus Christ who grow in loving God, loving others, and impacting the world. For 70 years, Cole Community Church has been actively training believers to be fruitful disciples of Jesus Christ, and across the decades, we have trusted and experienced God's faithfulness. From the earliest days, Cole Community Church has taken an interest in ministering to people outside the church. In the early 1950s, we had a Sunday morning bus ministry that brought in boys from distant neighborhoods, boys whose families lacked the funds to provide them nice clothes for church.
Reverend Burchard is the one who came looking for boys that didn't attend church, and they could come to church in their jeans. So they were called the Boys in Blue, because before that time, well, even at that time, everybody had to dress up to go to church. A lot of people, my family included, were poor enough that they didn't have a lot of dress clothes. And so then the boys could wear their jeans like they wore to school, to church. You didn't have to dress up. So they would come out to Gowan Field and talk to several families that lived out there at that time and pick the boys up and take them to church.
Cole Community Church also had a very early interest in reaching out to the lost in distant lands. The first missionary supported by Cole Community Church was Esther Benedict, who shortly after being sent out, married fellow worker Ricardo Brambilla.
My dad and the first pastor, the founder and the pastor of Cole Community Church were friends. My dad and mother had just moved to Boise. I was on my deputation trip, my last visit to Boise before going out to Mexico as a single missionary. And Pastor Burchard arranged the meeting at church. And after I spoke, Pastor said that he was not going to retire until I was arranged that they would continue supporting me. Now, Pastor Burchard was 80 years old, and he was going to retire, going to California, but he waited until they arranged it. I went to Mexico that fall. That was 1955, and I went to the mission school, and there Ricardo was just finishing up his leadership training. We met, and a year later we were married. And then Cole Church, without seeing Ricardo or knowing him previously, they had to go through the books that they were going to support us. We were so very, very thankful because we had very little support, and Cole Church became our main bases backing up. The ladies were so gracious in so many ways. In 4 years, I had 4 babies, but each time there was a baby shower. At Christmas, there were little gifts and clothes for the kids. It was so very, very special because we had no other church that backed us up like Cole Community Church at the very beginning. And at this time, Cole Church was meeting in the little wooden building. And from then until now, they're still helping us with our support. And that is 63 years later.
Growing up at Cole has been a really valuable part of my life. I remember when we were told stories about the missionaries overseas and what they were doing. We would also be told at the same time that we were missionaries right where we were. I don't think I fully understood that as a kid because that just didn't fully make sense to me, but it has as I've gotten older. That's been something that I've held on to a lot, is that I need to find places where I can love people and bring the gospel, even in my hometown. So it's cool that I now am working with InterVarsity at Boise State in my hometown, at my school that I went to. I am really encouraged and thankful for the ways that Cole cares about ministry, both locally and globally. I think that that's something super valuable that Cole really understands, that the kingdom of God is huge and diverse and beautiful and different and worth giving everything that we can to serve and to move forward.